What are the on-screen representations of post-war social and economic modernization and conflict beyond the screen? So I'm splitting this question into two separate talking points. I'm going to talk about social and economic modernization as two separate things. So social modernization is a bit of a vague term, so I'm going to focus on gender and start off with feminism. So feminism has been around for centuries, but it had a moment during World War II when men were drafted and women who stayed behind took over their jobs while they were away. After the war ended and the men came home, women were left with a choice. You either keep your newfound independence or go back to the patriarchal status quo. Ida Lupino's film The Bigamist shows the two sides of women after the war and its two female leads, Eve and Phyllis. It's important to remember that The New Woman, a pre-war feminist character trope, was still a woman written and directed by men. Ida Lupino brought her New Women to the screen, and with them a new era of feminist films. The Bigamist is interesting because at the beginning of the film, I believe that Phyllis was the independent woman and Eve was the quote-unquote housewife. But midway through Harry's story, their roles switch. Eve is too busy with work, so Harry, albeit unintentionally, has a baby with Phyllis and makes her his dutiful wife. But I don't necessarily want to talk about the plot of the film. I want to talk about the film's place in feminist history. I'm about to make a claim that is not true in history, but is true for all the films that we've watched in class, and that is that pre-war films were not directed by women. Now, we know this isn't true. Alice Guy Blaché was one of the first directors ever, with her career starting in the 1890s, and there were many other women making shorts and features and pioneering the practice of filmmaking along with their male counterparts during the dawn of cinema all the way up to today. The only thing that the post-war era helped with was making female-directed films mainstream. Enter Ida Lupino. Ida Lupino's work as an actress, director, producer, and screenwriter remains singular, a vital contribution to the evolution of women in cinema and of American independent film production in general.
I guess all traveling salesmen aren't alike, huh?
Some of us are quite harmless.
Yeah, you're kind of special.
Good night. I never expected to see Phyllis again. But I knew I'd remember this day, when two strangers helped each other through a lonely Sunday. I felt good again, not very sleepy.
We're ready with your call to San Francisco.
Yes, thank you, operator. Eve?
My, 2 calls in one day. Well, never mind, darling. This is deductible business.
Monkey business. I cheated on you today. I thought you should be the first to know.
Haven't you heard the wife is always the last to know?
I'm serious. A beautiful brunette, all curves and soft shoulders.
How wonderful. I hope you'll be very happy together.
So I've touched upon post-war women, now I want to talk about post-war men. There was an interesting phenomenon surrounding men who came home from the war, and that was that they suddenly didn't talk about their feelings. The horrors that they saw overseas made them clamp shut about not only their bad feelings, but their good feelings as well. They became the generation of men that don't talk, and the apathy that they passed down to their sons is still creating unfeeling men today. Strada features a man who's so frustrated with the thought of leading a happy life that he ruins the life of a woman who is not afraid to feel things and not afraid to love deeply. His whole act is centered around his masculinity, while Gelsomina gets to stand there and play his wife. It's possible that this film was a reflection of Fellini's own post-war frustrations with Italy, as we know he had made anti-fascist films before the war. Strada also brings us to the second talking point, which is post-war economic modernization. World War II was a main factor in pulling America out of the Great Depression, and it shows in The Bigamist through Harry and Eve's lavish home and financial ability to adopt a child.
And there's something else you should know about traveling salesmen.
You kill me.
They have very large expense accounts and frequently buy dinner for pretty girls they meet on buses.
Well, I must say your style's improving fast. But I'm afraid I can't. Sorry.
I'm sorry, too.
Yeah, well...
Tokyo Story from Japan and La Strada from Italy were both made in Axis power countries after they had effectively lost the war. Japan had an interesting anomaly after the war ended called the Japanese economic miracle, in which they experienced rapid economic growth despite the war. In Tokyo Story, Hirayama Shikichi is a retired head of a board of education, but he and Tomi never find themselves in dire economic straits. Rather, their loss is emotional and personal, yet this is not to suggest that the Hirayama's situation and suffering are any the less painful. Indeed, they too are caught up in a massive historical upheaval. For 1953, the year the film was made and the time in which it is set, lies roughly midway between the revision of the Civil Code of 1948, which supplanted the Meiji Civil Code of 1898, and the beginning of Japan's rapid economic growth, a process that the film shows to be already underway. I feel that this is reflected in Tokyo Story, as Koichi and Shige have no financial issues sending their parents to a hot spring, and throughout the film, none of the characters seem to be struggling with money. All of the young adults are constantly seen working hard and earning money, while their parents are not used to not being able to spend time with their kids.
ああ、この少女の写真どこで撮ったんじゃろう。
鎌倉です。お友達が撮ってくださって。
そう。
いつ頃？戦争に行く前の年です。そう。まばゆそうな顔をして。
これも首を曲げとるな。
あの子の癖でしたな。
いやもうとうに死んどるよ。8年にもなるんじゃもん。
そりゃそうですけどな。
Italy also experienced an economic miracle post-war, but Fellini elected to show the other side of it in La Strada. The view of poverty portrayed is extreme and also essential.
Ho detto che torniamo presto!
Partenza, la tua roba, Gelsomina, il tuo scialle, Gelsomina.
Salta dentro!
Figlia mia, oh, povera figlia mia.
Whenever a country is experiencing a period of economic growth, its most vulnerable citizens seem to be ignored for the ones who are succeeding. Fellini did his best to show them up close and personal and made a phenomenal film in the process. Knowing Fellini is not necessarily a nationalist but holds a love for Italian people, this was the most essential way for him to show his country to the world after the war. Fellini's emphasis on character is consistent with his oft-expressed concern with individuality, especially in contrast to what he sees as the collectivity of conventional existence. So the first three post-war films that we watched were The Bigamist, Tokyo Story, and La Strada. Any of the post-war films that we watched can fall into the same categories of economic growth and gender differences, but I elected to focus on the first three that we watched because I believe they were the most essential to watch first in order to understand where the world stood after the Second World War.